About damn time.
Years of development and countless delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we finally get a release for Black Widow, starring Scarlett Johansson in the titular role, David Harbour, Florence Pugh, Rachel Weisz, amongst many other people. Basically, it's the story of Black Widow coming to terms with her past and putting a stop to any future Black Widows that might emerge out of the Red Room, whom she served with in the past before switching sides and defecting to S.H.I.E.L.D. And in order to stop them for good, she has to reunite with her family. After giving it some thought, I am going to have to go into details about the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, don't watch this video. But if you have seen it, or if you just don't care about spoilers, feel free to stick around. But I gave you the warning so you don't have to kill me later on. And I feel like if I go through this whole video without giving anything away, I don't feel like I would do it any justice. But I also want to try to be respectful of those who have yet to see it, because you obviously have to give people some time to see it on their own terms. Plus, this being a hybrid release, Disney Plus streaming, and also in theaters where they're open. I'm not going to judge people if they'd rather watch it at home if they're still not comfortable yet going to a movie theater. But I personally bought a ticket and went to IMAX with my sister and my future brother-in-law, and the theater was fairly full. I'd say 3/4 of the theater was full. And to be honest, it felt really refreshing after a year and a half of just little to nothing. And now people around the world are getting ready to get past COVID-19. This is definitely going to help box office returns, and definitely, I think for sure, in a lot of ways going to help movie theaters survive in the long run. Nevertheless though, the overall consensus of this movie, even before its release, not too many people were thrilled, and to be honest, I wasn't really that impressed either, because I feel like Black Widow was suitable enough as her own character, as a side character in the movies where she teams up with the Avengers. I never really saw the need for a solo movie with her in the first place. But Marvel has proven themselves over the past decade, so I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And personally, I'm too invested in the MCU, so I'm not really giving up on this universe anytime soon. And if people are tired of it, well, that's on you. If you feel like it's worn out its welcome, then don't watch the movies and don't waste people's time complaining about it, because that's not going to do anybody any good. Anyway, but upon its release, the consensus I get is that it's very mixed to lukewarm at best. Some people like it, some are 50-50, others are disappointed, feeling like it has a lot to be desired. My verdict? It was a lot better than I expected. Definitely not top tier MCU quality, but this I would say is a solid entry in the series. It's got all the stuff that you expect in an MCU flick. Not too memorable, but fun action nevertheless. Witty bantering dialogue from the lead characters, solid acting all across the board. The villains, as you'd expect, not the most memorable, but the MCU, as a fellow YouTuber of mine, Rachel Wagner, pointed out, this universe focuses on the heroes, not so much the villains. We do get good villains in here, but this is mostly about the protagonists. And Marvel, say whatever you want about them, they do a great job, I think, of making the lead characters relatable. And I personally have found Scarlett Johansson to be a solid casting choice. At this point, having seen her in the other movies, Natasha feels very much like a well-rounded character in my book. We get more backstory about how she carried out all these missions for the Red Room, how she was responsible for killing this young girl who was the daughter of Ray Winstone's character, and how she feels a lot of remorse and regret for what she did, only then to have that daughter revealed to be the Taskmaster later on. We'll get to that in a little bit. But we also get to see that she was part of this family out in Ohio, and the parents, David Harbour and Rachel Weisz, were secret Russian spies working for Ray Winstone, and then something happened where they had to flee the country to Cuba, and their two young girls were kidnapped by the Red Room and raised as spies, and unfortunately had certain procedures on them that caused them to not be able to bear children, as we saw a glimpse of in Age of Ultron. And that's the thing, because this movie adds a couple more layers of emotional weight to this character and the overall arc that the series has for her. When Scarlet Witch hypnotizes everybody and we see that flashback of her being experimented on during the training scenes that we see, now we get a little bit more in depth of, oh, it wasn't just her, it was other women that went through that training program. And her sister, played by Florence Pugh, went through the exact same situation. And Rachel Weisz, who was the mother of sorts, was the brains of the operation, being the lead scientist in creating this Black Widow program. David Harbour's character, the father figure, was known as the Red Guardian in the Soviet Union, basically the Russian Captain America of sorts. On that note, he and Florence Pugh, in my book, are the standouts in the acting department. Elena's very much in the same boat as Natasha. The only difference is, all she knew was how to be a secret assassin, and now that she's broken free from that program, she has no idea what to do with herself because she feels like she has no direction. So there's a lot of emotional damage to her under the surface. And I think Florence Pugh manages to convey that beautifully. And the interplay that she has with Natasha, they feel legitimately like siblings, similar to how Natasha and Clint Barton felt with the brother-sister bond that they had in the other movies. And David Harbour's character, the Red Guardian, is basically the comedic bone of this movie. He literally chews up every scene that he's in. It's the appropriate amount of over-the-topness, but also the right amount of heart that the movie needs. Rachel Weisz, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot to do here, and I wish that we had more focus on her going into like how she felt about the scientific program that she was a part of. But she does a good job in all the scenes that she's in, though. As far as the other actors, Ray Winstone is pretty solid, and there's an actress, Olga Kurylenko, hopefully I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. She has a secret role in here too, and other people I've heard say that they would have preferred her as the Black Widow. I don't disagree with that, but personally I think ScarJo was the better fit. I'm just saying. She does pretty solid work as the Taskmaster. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that she wore the costume for the Taskmaster. Now, on the Taskmaster himself, probably the big reveal is that he's actually the daughter of Ray Winstone's character, who Natasha supposedly killed in that bombing, but she was brainwashed by her father using that secret formula that they're trying to get their hands on and use it to disperse on the other Black Widow assassins to snap them out of their trance. I was kind of surprised by that reveal, but at the same time, it wasn't the most jaw-dropping reveal, but it was kind of surprising to see that, and a nice little twist, I would say, on Marvel's part, because it's not a conventional reveal. That Marvel does play on certain things, but not exactly in the way that you would expect. And I'm not really into the comics personally, so I was not that upset by the reveal, even though I know the Taskmaster from the Spider-Man PS4 game. Very different take here, which is fine. I think in the service of the movie, it fits fine. But as far as the comic book fans, from what I could tell, they're not too pleased. And I knew right away, as I watched that reveal, oh boy, some people are gonna be pissed. Similar to the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3, although the reaction there was a lot more explosive. But that's a whole nother discussion. Not one of the most mind-blowing reveals, but I thought it was done pretty effectively, and I think it added some more emotional depth to Natasha herself. And as far as the spectacle and action, this feels more like an amalgamation of Jason Bourne, James Bond, and Mission Impossible combined into one. There's a car chase scene in Budapest, or Budapest as they call it in the movie. I'm never gonna think of that the same way. I half expected Tom Cruise to show up here in a helicopter or jump on top of the car that Nat and Yelena were in. If that were to happen, I would have cheered. And then we also get the appropriate MCU schlock at the climax of the movie when that big headquarters that the Red Room is in starts to fall from the sky, and Nat starts flying through the debris, chasing after the bad guys, or escaping the Taskmaster, trying to catch her sister. Definitely not realistic, but hey, you're in a universe where there's a demigod wielding a hammer, a talking tree, super soldier serum, and gamma radiation. What did you expect? And I love the joke that they use where Yelena pokes fun at Nat for doing that pose that she usually does in some of the other movies. And I kid you not, as I walked out of the theater with my sister, I saw this 10-year-old kid doing that exact same pose. And I thought, oh boy, that's not gonna go away anytime soon. Oh, you think you're so special now that you're some kind of big shot with the Avengers now? Shut up. And I don't think there's that many over-reliances on other parts of the MCU, particularly with Iron Man and Captain America, since chronologically this takes place right after Civil War. As well as Thor, they are mentioned in little bits of dialogue, but we don't really need to see them because this is a Black Widow movie. Now, had they shown Tony Stark in like a video message or something saying, "Where's Natasha?" I wouldn't have had a problem with that necessarily, but I'm also kind of glad that they didn't do that. And especially in light of Endgame, I don't think it's really necessary to touch on that again. But hey, I mean, if they could have found a way to do it, I would have been okay with it either way. And to be honest, I feel like this movie would have done much, much better had they released this after Civil War, or at least somewhere around Infinity War or Endgame, because this movie in a way does feel like an afterthought. After Endgame, when everybody was upset over Black Widow's death, they finally announced a Black Widow movie, almost seeming like they did it in order to please the fans who were upset that they probably weren't going to get a Black Widow movie. That being said though, I still think it's a really good time. But we're going to have to keep in mind that when we go back and watch this stuff from Iron Man 1 onward, we're going to have to put Black Widow right after Civil War, because otherwise, nobody's going to know what the hell's going on here. And we also get an appearance or two from William Hurt's character as Secretary Ross. Doesn't have a whole lot to do, but it's one of those MCU things where it does let you know that this is happening right after the Sokovia Accords, without being so reliant on other movies. Some people pinpoint that as a problem with the MCU, and in certain movies it does get a little too overbearing, but The thing with this series, they're all interconnected to each other, and it all affects each other one way or another. I personally have come to accept that, and if some people don't, that's all well and good, but even so, if you're still complaining about that, I don't know what else to tell you. And I also like the ending scene where she thanks that one ally that helped her out with her blonde hair that we also see in Avengers Infinity War, goes off to find the rest of the Avengers. And then we get a post-credits scene with Yelena at Natasha's grave, which I assume is right after the events of Endgame. And it's a really emotionally powerful moment, and until Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Falcon and Winter Soldier shows up, randomly blowing her nose, kind of killing the moment, and it kind of took me out of the moment a little bit. Still, it's nice to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the MCU. Just get the other Seinfeld actors in here, please. But then she gives Yelena a mission to find the man responsible for killing her sister. And it's a picture of Hawkeye. I'm assuming that's tying into the Hawkeye series later on down the line. I don't know when exactly that's going to be coming. If any of you guys know, let me know in the comments. But it got a lot of people's attention, myself included. And if this means that Florence Pugh is going to show up in future MCU movies, hey, I'm all for it. So yeah, I really like Black Widow. It's another solid entry in the MCU. Not top tier quality like some of the other entries in the series. But nevertheless, I think it's a relevant entry and it adds more layer of emotion to the Black Widow character. And I think in light of everything that we've seen from her, I think in some ways it's given us a bit of closure with her character. Maybe it's not necessary in the long run, but in any case, I think it makes Black Widow's character arc overall feel a lot more complete. And Scarlett Johansson, if you're somehow watching this, thanks for all the hard work you did with this character in this series, and I'm really sad to see you go. But me and a few other people will always appreciate what you did. So those are my thoughts on Black Widow. What are your guys' thoughts? Comment below and tell me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.